Spider-Man, Spider-Man, media empire of Spider-Man, a web of emotion, enjoyed by both old and young. Look at all of the Spider-Man. Welcome to How Hard Could It Be, where I do that YouTube thing and then talk about my challenges in the process. Before we get started, a thank you to White Light for some of the video game footage. Also, spoilers for anything Spider-Man, honestly. I'm not gonna be able to keep track of it all at this point. Do you know who the most prolific characters in media are? Not franchises per se, but characters themselves. I think a good bet for that would be Batman and Spider-Man. Both have had 7 solo movies to themselves over the last 30 years or so. When it comes to TV series, both have almost always had a cartoon running since the 90s, with only a year or two for gaps between ending and starting a new one. In the games department, both have had dozens of games with a variety of titles. Batman and Spider-Man even showed up in the same game, The Revenge of Shinobi, where Spider-Man shows up as a boss and then transforms into Batman.
What?
These two truly are media juggernauts.
I'm the juggernaut! Language!
They're almost entirely on par with one another, with only one exception. Batman has a lot of animated movies, usually straight to DVD or limited theater release, whereas thanks to Sony's stranglehold on Spider-Man, the only animated movie that's gotten out for the wall crawler is Into the Spider-Verse. Spidey even has a few novels, and the one I read was pretty dope. Now, I'd love to spend a half hour talking about both, but for now, I want to concentrate on Spider-Man. Why? Because I'm dubbing September my Spider Month. Spider-Tember is my thing I've decided to do, so let's make some Spidey content. Starting out with, why is the wall crawler so prolific in our media landscape? Starting with, naturally, the man himself. The wall crawler is very flexible, both in physicality and in personality. The one thing that almost always remains the same, however, is this one line.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
The Gospel of Uncle Benjamin is perhaps one of the most iconic lines for a character, boosted by its repetition for the wall crawler. It is central to his character. He makes the sacrifices he does because it is his responsibility to do so. If only all of our powerful individuals in real life followed this same code. Due to this personal responsibility, Spider-Man puts himself on the line in a lot of ways. He is constantly pulling his punches so as to not excessively harm his often less than super opponents. Dr. Octopus found this out himself after he took over the Webbed Wonder's body during the Superior Spider-Man story. Otto tore Scorpion's jaw clean off with one punch, as if he were trying to infringe on Saitama's gimmick. This is who Spider-Man is. He's constantly trying to give chances to those that may not deserve it, preserving life at nearly all costs.
Because that's what heroes do.
Humor is another key tenet to who Spider-Man is. He trades barbs with his foes, both with his fists and his words, often using jokes to put his opponents off guard, enrage them, or manipulate their reactions.
This is starting to sound like a bad comic book plot.
It's also one of his key coping mechanisms for the fear that is ever present during these conflicts. This makes him a really fun character to adapt. His jokes and japes are a source of amusement for the audience, allowing them to laugh at the villains and with the hero of the story. His sense of humor allows the audience to relate to him, break the tension, and keep everything at a manageable level. Many may poke holes at the MCU due to their tendency to lean into jokes too much, but I think that's largely modeled after Spider-Man.
Why did you attack me?
Now, attack is such a strong word.
His intelligence also plays a key role. He invented his own web fluid and web shooters, spider tracers that work off of his own spider sense, and is always adapting to whatever opponent he faces. He's put insulation over his suit to face off against Electro, made his own spider armor when his spidey sense was on the fritz. Peter Parker's pretty perspicacious. He's even dumped a vial of radiation-infused material into himself to stick it to Morlun. It probably plays into his adaptability into any conflict he comes across, allowing him to use all the tools at his sticky fingertips. There's even been multiple instances of him bumping noodles with Reed Richards and Iron Man, impressing both of them. Peter Parker isn't always a perfect good guy, however. He's got a dark side, partially fueled by his unfortunate past of being bullied, I'm sure. He's shown moments of greed and has acted in extreme anger. I genuinely doubt the symbiote who would be Venom would have been able to influence Peter the way he did if it wasn't for his dark side, for his anger and his guilt. He's a flawed person, like we all are. In the end, he always tries to do the right thing, though. Even in his darkest moments, he refrains from murder. He shows restraint at every turn. Peter Parker, Spider-Man, always tries to do what's right. One of my favorite scenes in any game is this one here.
I don't know what to do.
Yes, you do.
He is not afraid of sacrifice. While the webhead may be incredibly protective of his family, he can still do the right thing when others' lives are on the line. He displays compassion at almost every turn. He's pretty emotionally intelligent, such as this lovely scene from The Amazing Spider-Man.
Just a normal guy, right? Want to hold on to this? Hold my mask. All right. What's your name? Jack?
Yes.
Let's get you out of here. Okay. Stay very
Say what you will about the rest of this movie, but man is this scene great. There's also this lovely scene in comics where Spider-Man consoles Franklin Richards about the loss of his uncle, Johnny Storm, and shares his own experience with him. All of these things are a huge reason why he's a true hero, and they're only the tip of the iceberg. Of course, Spider-Man himself is pretty popular, but a character is only as strong as their rogues gallery. One of the big things that plays into his popularity is the huge variety of villains. So how do his villains play into this equation? In regards to stories, all these characters have a wide array of motives. Dr. Otto Octavius has been portrayed in many ways, questing for clean energy in the Raimi film, gunning for revenge in Spider-Man PS4, and scheming to escape in Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. The Green Goblin has quested for power, revenge, and schemed in all sorts of ways. The Vulture has both tried to suck the life out of others to fuel himself, but also been portrayed as a working man just trying to help his employees survive. Sandman is usually portrayed as a somewhat decent guy, just trying to get money for his daughter, but just doesn't have the ability to do so by legitimate means. And of course, many of his villains are just in it for the money and the money alone. Another part of this whole thing is how these villains go about their scheming. Look at all these guys. Mac Gargan's Scorpion was designed implicitly in the story as the best way to hunt the spider. Scorpions and spiders naturally clashing against one another in nature, and the only way a spider wins against a scorpion is by tackling that dangerous tail. That's much the same in his stories. Rhino acts as a huge bruiser with impenetrable skin with strength to spare. Green Goblin's ability to fly and chuck explosives and goblin harangues presents a huge danger to the wall crawler. Doc Ock's arms give him a huge close-quarters advantage and presents a unique movement problem for Peter. And then you have Venom, the bigger, badder version of Spider-Man, with a hate boner for the wall crawler, presents a huge target, and is a high-danger opponent. On top of being stronger, and sometimes faster, he also sometimes doesn't trigger Pete's spider sense, taking away one of Spidey's main advantages. All of these unique abilities and fighting styles are great for both the silver and small screen, as well as video games. In films and TV, they act as some of the best set pieces in the world of film. Take this wonderful fight scene from the second Raimi Spider film. Putting unique clashes on the screen is what film and TV is all about, and it's a big reason why these movies pull so much of our attention. While other factors may be called into question, such as casting, writing, and studio interference, I think there's one thing we can all agree on. When it comes to these action set pieces, Spidey has got some of the best around. That leads us into games. While Spider-Man games are often stuffed to the brim with mooks of all flavors, whether they're gang members, street thugs, military groups, or any of the number of evil organizations in the Marvel Universe, his games would be nothing if not for these major villains. Playing up the numerous adaptations of characters, Spider-Man's villains offer unique challenges in every game, whether it's trying to sneak around Rhino, avoid pumpkin bombs, razor wings and chucking Goblin's own junk back at him, or any of the other myriad forms of conflict in Spider-Man's games. They always present unique and interesting boss fights. Sometimes you have to fight in the air, chasing your target down with a larger variety of web maneuvers. Others you have just seconds to dodge out of the way of incoming attacks, often redirecting projectiles back to the opponent. Then you get those moments where it's just an all-out brawl, full of dodging, blocking, and getting punches in where you can. Spider-Man games truly flourish due to all of his villains offering so many unique challenges, mechanics, and story elements. That, of course, leads us into his storylines. Spider-Man, and by extension Peter Parker's stories, benefit from his wide array of motivations, internal and external challenges, chief among them being the Daily Bugle. Whether it takes the form of a traditional newspaper or an Alex Jones-esque website and podcast thing, this presents one of the most important conflicts in his stories. It's always ever present, and may be one of the biggest things that keeps him in check. If he so much as steps a foot out of line, the Bugle will be all over him like maggots on meat. And can I just express an appreciation for the fact that a spider-themed hero's biggest foe is a newspaper? A newspaper out to swat him for catching society's pests? Peter also has to protect his loved ones, of course, and a big part of that protection is his identity. It's no wonder that in the first Raimi film, this line is said,
The heart, Osborn. First, we attack his heart.
This is right after Norman susses out his identity thanks to one inconvenient flesh wound. Even the MCU knows how key his secret identity is to Spider-Man, even if he does share it with his allies a little too readily.
I'm Peter, by the way.
Doctor Strange.
Oh, you're using your made-up names.
The end of Far From Home gives away the goose, and I'm genuinely curious how this plays out in future movies. Keeping his identity secret is one of Spider-Man's biggest tools to keep his family safe. It played a key part in the Superhero Registration Act in the comics, with his identity being made public being a pivotal scene. This one comic alone is probably the biggest reason why he was dragged into the MCU's version. Keeping his identity secret gives another layer of tension to many scenes, whether it's rescuing the ones he cares about, trying to hide his voice from others, or simply trying to have a Thanksgiving dinner. Sometimes the tension is all about someone else trying to find his identity. Jameson himself has concocted many plans over the years in comics to do so, whether it's this odd robot or hiring Mac Gargan to figure it out before he had him transformed into the Scorpion. Peter also has a pretty expansive love life. His romantic encounters include such names as Mary Jane, Betty Brant, Gwen Stacy, Felicia Hardy, and more. He even had an ill-fated date with Susan Storm. Oftentimes this runs headlong into conflict due to his multifaceted double life. He's had to ditch dates, explain absences, and disappear at a moment's notice, all due to his double life as Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Their association with Peter can also lead to them being dragged into the conflicts, ratcheting up the tension to a fever pitch. This has led to multiple iconic moments, the death of Gwen Stacy both in comics and the heartbreaking adaptation in Amazing Spider-Man.
Hey. Gwen. Hey. Breathe. Hey. You're okay.
The standoff between Peter and Green Goblin, where Goblin threatens both Peter's heartthrob MJ and a car of children. Even MJ's mysterious disappearance in the 1990s cartoon. Whatever form Spider-Man takes, it's bound to have a relationship ever present, whether it's in the background or the foreground of the story. All of these aspects allow Spider-Man's stories to be complex, multifaceted ordeals with multiple potential outcomes. Sometimes there are people Spider-Man cannot save, but people that Peter Parker can. Such as the instance of a Spider-Verse in cartoons, where Peter Parker manages to talk down a version of himself who lost his way, alongside another reality's Uncle Ben.
Peter, it's me, Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben? I've been told everything. Is it really you? I know you've had a very bad
There are times when Spidey cannot save the day, leaving lasting impact on his character.
I love you.
Other times where he can help someone redeem themselves.
I will not die, monster.
Spider-Man's stories and the characters within are fascinating, engaging on multiple levels, and allow a multitude of adaptations. Speaking of which, why is the web slinger so easy and natural to adapt? The multifaceted nature of the conflicts Peter Parker endures is probably why he is so ever-present in media. He juggles school, work, relationships, and moonlights as Spider-Man, resulting in an array of clashes between his personal and professional life. This, combined with fighting villains and street crime, investigating and inventing, can often leave him with limited time and money. He may be short on rent, get kicked out of his apartment, or have to ditch out on a date night, all resulting in different character dilemmas. When it comes to TV, the Wallcrawler's comics are a good basis for how he works in these features. His long-running storylines are great to adapt, especially because a lot of times they come packaged with intermediary conflicts that are perfect for TV. Take for example the Secret Wars, that led into Spider-Man himself hand-picking a team to go up against some of the biggest bads in comics. The smaller conflicts led into a fantastic finale, with all of this leading into one of the first instances of a Spider-Verse, which was subsequently followed up 2 decades later by the Web Warriors version, with them pulling up even more unique Spider People. This leads naturally into movies, with 2018's Into the Spider-Verse, another animated story with multiple Spider-Folks. While many Spider-Man stories greatly benefit from longer-form media, he's practically a titan of the movie format as well. Condensed timelines allow for a story to take place over multiple days in-universe, but only require a few hours of our time. It allows for things to develop at a faster time, which is perfect for origin stories, both for Spider-Man but also for his relationships and for the villains. Sequels can also give a great sense of progression, with the Wallcrawler developing over multiple films. This can be seen in all of his outings in multiple ways. His maturity in relationships during the Raimi films, his connection with New York in both Raimi films and the Mark Webb Amazing movies, and the younger Peter's connections with the Avengers and his maturity with being a street-level hero while in the MCU. Games are a different story entirely. Games take the single storyline aspects of a movie and often combine it with the long-form storytelling of a show, allowing for an even greater length of time to demonstrate the growth of the character. Spider-Man's video games often benefit from having a greater focus on a central arc. Look at the PlayStation 4's game story centering around Dr. Otto's descent into madness and revenge, and his rise as a villain, culminating in this wonderful finale.
But you didn't listen. You knew.
Many of these games take advantage of New York City, utilizing it as a map to explore, and is truly a perfect setting for the Wallcrawler. Whether it's being taken over by gangs or by hordes of symbiotes, the web slinger does his best to save the day. The one thing all of these forms of media, and comics included, benefit from is character adaptability. Little changes in the stories can often have a butterfly effect for a series as a whole. The 90s cartoon played it pretty straight, mostly adapting the comics, while at times adding their own spins. Both Raimi and Mark Webb's films altered Spider-Man's origin from a radioactive spider to a genetically modified one, and both of them had differing plans for Oscorp and by extension the Green Goblin. Dr. Octopus has had some of the most interesting adaptations, a man wishing to have
The power of the sun in the palm of my hand.
a woman manipulating wormholes to cross dimensions, or a broken potato of a man who relies almost completely on his mechanical limbs.
Nothing insane about that statement, mister. Doctor!
Costume designs, personalities, motivations, and interactions all changed drastically from adaptation to adaptation. Some received well, while others fall short.
I'm going to die!
All of this allows for Spider-Man to remain a popular character without getting old. Updates to his origin, his other stories, different romantic choices, and a plethora of unique characters to allow for interesting action set pieces or challenging boss fights allow Spidey to be adapted again and again without getting stale. Artists even find creative ways to interpret the suit, whether it's throwing raised webbing on the classic suit, the angular spider designs on the Stark suits from the MCU, or the cornucopia of other designs from comics, games, and more. Spider-Man may forever remain fresh in our minds with audiences and with the tomato. Hi, I'm Captain Hikib, Here to talk to you about one of the most valuable traits a soldier or YouTuber can have. Persistence. Sometimes, persistence is the key to victory. Sometimes it leads to disappointment, and it seems like it's not worth it. And you wonder why you work so hard on something so exhausting. How many more of these? Boy, was this a doozy. This is by far the longest thing I've attempted to work on. I asked for a bit of help with some game footage I want to be able to use from a really unique game that I have zero access to. I wanted to get some gameplay from Web of Shadows, a game I really wanted to get, but I believe is basically permanently unavailable now, at least legitimately. Again, thank you White Light for letting me use the footage. Keeping track of everything was a monster of a task. Various videos, audios, pictures, and comic panels. Speaking of which, my first real encounter with comic panels. As I understand it, YouTubers generally edit out much of the writing on comic panels so as to stay within the binds of fair use. So I made sure to do that. I did leave some text in for context. Hopefully that doesn't get me in too much trouble. I also did some fancy panning in order to display comics in a nice way. Created assets by throwing images together and played around with video placement. Alongside this, I want to show you how much of a pain channel art is. See, you have a nice little banner on your YouTube channel like this. Unfortunately, there's a huge caveat. See, YouTube suggests a really big picture for this to serve as a background on a TV or some such. I didn't quite realize this when I made my first art and aligned everything at the top, but that didn't really work out. I downloaded a version of the template, edited everything around, and now hopefully it looks somewhat decent. Maybe someday I'll change it though, update what videos get displayed as evidence of my progression with this whole project. If you enjoyed this dive into the spider mythos, then stay tuned for more Spider Month, web zip, throw a rocket, dodge some gunfire, rescue your girlfriend, beat up the Kingpin, and enter the Spider-Verse.